Awesome. Well, welcome everyone for Okadev's 223. It's going to be a while until we have a nice number again. Yeah, this one will, I think, be primarily all about Amsterdam EIP planning. But before we get into that, we do have a few Fusaka-related points again. So to start us off there, we have Barnabas with a quick update on the Sepolia BPO 1 and 2 situation.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So Fusaka Devnet 3 is still ongoing. We have 99% participation. Every single client combination is working just fine now. We rolled out the latest Lighthouse image, and that solved all of our bugs as of now. Sepolia had their BPO activated 2 days ago. We went up to max blobs of 15, and the next BPO will be in 4 days and 9 hours. The next fork will be then the Hoodie network, which will get its Fusaka update in 5 days and 4 hours. And then the first BPO will be in approximately 2 weeks from now. And then in 19 days, BPO 2 on Hoodie. Everything went smoothly on BPO 1, and we expect a smooth transition on Hoodie as well. If you're running a Hoodie validator, please make sure that you update your node, as there's only 5 days left now till the fork. That's about it for the testnets.
Thank you, and it's great to see that it's going so smoothly. Were there any comments? Did anyone have anything specifically regarding the testnets regarding Sepolia or the upcoming Hoodie forks that they wanted to discuss?
Maybe just one more point. Holosky is officially going away next week. It's already seeing some drop in participation. We are close to on finalization at this point. We are at the low 70s. So if you're running a Holosky validator, just keep it up till you can, and then we're going to be officially shutting it off next week, Friday. And if you're listening and you still have infrastructure running in Holosky, please migrate to Sepolia or Hoodie as soon as possible.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, and so if anyone still has anything on their bucket list that they really wanted to get done on Holsky, now is your time. Okay. Then next up, with everything going so smoothly, Alex wanted to talk about mainnet dates. Alex, do you want to start us off? We then have a few comments to go through.
Yeah, definitely. So last week, let's see, let me just make sure I have the right dates here. So essentially, the proposal would be to follow this document from Barnabas, which I can drop here in the chat. 1 second. And what does that have? So it has mainnet for Fusaka on December 3rd. You can look at the epoch and slot there in the doc. BPO 1 and 2 on December 9th, and then on January 7th, respectively. So we brought this up on last week's ACDC as sort of a temperature check. And are you talking about the doc, Barnabas? I just saw the chat here.
Yeah, so the original BPO1 proposal was the 17th of December, and we have there was a bit of pushback from different client teams saying that the 17th of December falls a bit too close to Christmas and the holidays. So we decided to propose the 9th as BPO1.
I see. Okay, so the doc has been updated, but yeah, it was moved from last time. Okay, thanks for calling it out. But yeah, so then check the doc for latest times. But yeah, long story short, we did like a temperature check last call. People were generally on board, so I wanted to do the same thing here. So I think one caveat is if we follow our process doc, I think, when reading says basically we would wait to officially set these dates until Hoodie has finalized, which will be next week. That being said, if we want to go with the schedule, the timing's pretty tight. And so that would ultimately look like client releases on, I believe that's November 3rd. So 1 month before the proposed mainnet date. And just given the timing, it makes sense to go ahead and get this on people's radars now. Yeah, I would like to go ahead and see what people think about this here. Generally, I'd say from the CL side, we're good to go at these dates. If we're good to go from the EL side, which we can, assess on this call right now, then I would say, basically we'll do this. We can follow our process and go ahead and confirm officially on next week's ACDC, but wanted to go ahead and get this on people's radars just so they're aware because, yeah, you'll have more time to get it released together if you're a client team. And I guess final note, this is all conditional on Hoodie going well. So again, if something doesn't for some reason, then yeah, we'll have to adjust. But so far it's been going well and it seems like we can pull this off. So that's my spiel. And I'd love to hear from any EL teams or anyone else on the call, what they think about this.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. We already have a few comments in the chat from Lukasz and Marius, plus warning. Is anyone else with comments on this? So maybe if we briefly just go through the client teams to see is there anyone from Reth on the call with an opinion on this? Do these dates look reasonable from your side?
Yeah, looks good.
Sounds good. And from the Besu side?
No issues here.
Awesome. And Aragon?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, did I miss any client? I hope so. Please, no more clients. I need one hand to count, and so this is great. Okay. Then Alex, you already mentioned that basically because there was also some discussions in the issue. Andrew mentioned that the process specifically would then officially only make these dates. Let us set these dates next week, but basically the idea is we are pre-committing to this timeline, assuming Hoodie goes smoothly. Perfect. We will a bit later on talk about the Glamsdam EIP process, because then the question is also, does this then today already trigger the deadline for EIP proposals? So that would mean now would be the last week that would start today, basically, for EIP proposals. But let's get into that once we get to Glamsdam. Which actually we will do immediately now. So any last comments on the actual timeline?
Just one mention that I've proposed to basically clarify the mainnet update requirement. Instead of mainnet should not have an upgrade date set until all testnets have been upgraded, to mainnet should not have an upgrade date set until at least one testnet has been upgraded. I'm just curious what everyone thinks of this. I posted the PR for that in the chat. Continuity. So this would basically allow us to schedule the mainnet right now.
Photos?
I'm not against this, but one issue that this raises is that our users might update the client with a testnet release that has the mainnet date, but it's not really considered to be a mainnet release. Like, we are still releasing things, even though we've already been through a couple of testnets upgrades, and we still find bugs. And clients that, if we go with this thing of like setting a date well in advance after just one testnet upgrade, we might see users that haven't really upgraded to the actual mainnet release with all the bug fixes.
Yeah, but we don't need to put the dates in a release until closer to the release. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it would still be up to the client when they want to bake in the date. It's just that we could officially schedule the date.
I guess one note is I believe there's an escape hatch in this document. Let me go see if I can find the text. But basically it just says like, this is all subject to change at the whims of ACDE. The thing with this is that it doesn't say which testnet, and like I think not all of them are created equal, essentially. But yeah, I think we could go either way.
Is this something that we prefer to make a decision on today on the call, or would we rather take that discussion offline?
I prefer to set the date more in advance and have like people know the date rather than following some arbitrary document that someone drafted up a long time ago.
Yeah, I think
Basically predictability for the ecosystem.
I think POTUS's concern is addressed by not putting the dates into an actual release until later. Would that be correct, POTUS?
Yeah, so I mean, there are other issues too. Like on P2P, you advertise when you have the next fork epoch, you change your ENR and a bunch of things. So the fork schedule changes, and this changes the configuration of clients. So we might have clients that are already announcing what the next fork is, and some clients that don't. It's not really a serious problem. It's just that something to think about.
So could it make sense to have like an explicit decoupling of these two time points in time in the document, that we basically like we go with this proposed change in terms of the deciding the dates, but then we specifically explicitly like use the alt mechanism for to say basically only after the last testnet do we have client releases, or would that not make sense?
Yeah, I think that could make sense. I don't see what it's going to change today. So then perhaps we just take this discussion async to the PR and we can cover it next week's call after people have chimed in there.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Any last comments on it right now, or ready to move on? Okay, then I mean the chat remains open. Awesome. Then I think we are ready to move to Glamsterdam. Before we get into the entire EIP side of things, I just wanted to briefly check, is there any specific DevNet updates, anything that happened recently that people wanted to briefly talk about? Yeah, sorry, when I said DevNet, more like work towards DevNets. That's I should have been a bit more precise. Okay, no,
Stefan?
Oh yeah.
We have block level access list cryptosys that's running locally, and we are still iterating towards a stable DevNet. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow or early next week, we can launch block level access list DevNet 0.
Awesome. That's very exciting. Good. Then see that's good context for us to go into the governance discussions, that there's already real nice progress. Alex, you had a comment on the issue we discussed over last week, the process from now onwards, now that we're getting close to the proposal deadline, how we want to go about the non-headliner EIP discussions. Do you want to summarize that?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is our first time through this headliner process, and I think this transition wasn't exactly as concrete as it could be. So, to that end, just giving like an actual sort of schedule here. Yeah, again, like Ansgar was saying, it seems like we can go ahead and start thinking about Amsterdam not headliners. And the sort of next milestone we had said is, once we had agreed to mainnet, then we'd have 1 week after as a deadline for proposals. And again, it sounds like we'll confirm, quote, officially these dates next call, but I think we're at a place where we can go ahead and do that. And again, that being saying any non-headliner EIPs need to have been proposed for Amsterdam with deadline 1 week from today. So consider this your 1 week call to do that. There's already actually.
I have a concern on that deadline, just
Okay.
due to the process of EIPs. So they have to go through the EIP office editing hours if it's a new EIP. And next week is ERCs, and the week after is EIPs. So if anybody wants to propose a new EIP, they're unlikely to get it in now. They're unlikely to get it in by next week deadline.
Pooja?
I just want to add a small point here. Next week is not ERC only, it is EIP plus ERC. We generally try to keep ERC one alternate week, but EIPs are all the week. So if there is anything, we can definitely add it on the agenda and we can get it merged.
Okay. This was news to me. So, okay, you're saying you have to go to the EIP editing office hours call to get an EIP merged, a new one?
No, it's just the schedule on getting new ones merged isn't. I think like a 2 week deadline would be better. from now, since that data is forward.
Okay, I don't really see the link there. Like,
Well,
could people not propose and then?
Yeah, but you can't. You need the EIP numbered and merged, and then put in the proposal EIP. There's like a. It's
Right,
if
but
you
I
were
guess
to
you're
write
you're
it, if you
saying
were
that
to
they
write
only
an
hand out numbers if you show up to this call. That's the part I wasn't aware of.
No, I'm saying if you're trying to yeah, what I'm saying is it's not instant. If you put a EIP in today, you won't necessarily be able to have it merged and in the meta EIP by next week.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of wondering about this and would echo Barnabas here in the chat. Like, I think we can assign numbers as soon as there's a PR. And then even if that PR is not merged, you could make yet another PR that puts the number into the meta EIP.
I'm sorry, Ansgar, your hand is there, so if you want to go first.
Yeah, just wanted to briefly say that I think we should also be to me, the deadline is really more about basically signaling your the proposal intent. So if someone basically gets like if they don't yet have a number assigned, or they have a number assigned but they don't figure out how to do the PR for against the meta EIP before the other one is merged or whatever, and they end up just commenting on next week's ACDC issue with the intent to propose the EIP, anything like this, I think as long as it's clear that an EIP is proposed basically by a week from now, I personally would not mind counting that against the deadline, given that it's a bit of a more symbolic point in time anyway.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
I would echo with Ansgar here, but generally speaking, getting back to Ben Adams' point, I think it would be a good idea to give a 2 weeks timeline for any new author to propose anything, like at least getting the PR merged as in draft format. But as it is also mentioned in the chat, generally speaking, we get the number almost the same day, and we can use that number. We can use that number against the meta EIP as well. We can perhaps update it later on.
Okay, so then I'll amend this to say, yeah, like even just a PR to the EIP repo would count. And we can sort out the governance stuff, in parallel if we need to. But I would prefer to keep things moving here, just to keep things moving. Otherwise, it'll just spill out further in time. And one reason why is the next point, which is that because of this, then we can move to discussing the different EIPs. There are a large number of EL EIPs to go through, so we'll need to reason about that. There's fewer on the CL side, so it should be easier, but towards that end, I think having some sort of document of client opinions like we've done in the past would be really useful. And even if it's like higher level, like, I don't know if people are going to necessarily have a view on every last EIP, but even like directionally with themes would be good. And I think that will help, us here as we go over the next couple calls, sort through all the different EIPs. I would propose then that clients try to get such list out by like November 6th. And then I think that's an ACDE date. Let me just double check. Yes, it is. So having that ready, and then that basically gives us the rest of November to go ahead and sort through everything. Then we can finalize the Glanstream scope by November.
Right, and just to give a little bit of context for this, because if someone hasn't checked, if some of you haven't checked the PFI list for a while, we have currently, well, it's a bit in flux, and we'll hopefully be able to later on this call to remove up to 2 EIPs from it, but we are roughly 30 proposed EIPs. Out of those 30, it's exactly 2 CL side EIPs. Plus you can count FOCIL, but FOCIL is already CFI'd, so we have 3 CL side EIPs. There might be one more coming, I heard. But basically, then we have 27, 28 EL side EIPs. So there's like a very big asymmetry also in terms of the amount of work to just go through for client teams, and even as Alex was saying, even if say a full-on EIP by EIP yes no opinion is I think not really necessary for the first round of documents with opinions, but even just in terms of having ideas of like what themes, what rough scoping, these kind of things, it will be more effort for EL dev. So I think you should be aware of that when we discuss timelines. That said, yeah, what do people think about Alex's idea to basically have a first round of people going over the EIPs, forming opinions, communicating them over the next 2 weeks? Does that sound realistic?
Well, it sounds a bit aggressive if there are 28 EIPs, but we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking the same thing. Feels a little tight. I think one more week would be totally doable, but I don't super strongly hold that opinion.
Yeah, Alex and I were going back and forth about this as well. Obviously, the problem is that these documents really only make sense for an ACDE. So then the question would be 2 weeks, or then otherwise 4 weeks, really. And 4 weeks gets us basically exactly to the ACDE that is right during DEF CON. I don't think we've decided yet whether that we'll skip that ACDE or not, but either way, it doesn't feel like an ideal point either. And then otherwise, we only really have time towards the end of the year. So it feels like it would be really, really nice if we could make 2 weeks from now happen, even if, again, like I think given the number of EIPs, it would be understood that it's much more of a course view of like just some basis for discussion, that people basically come into it with some clear idea at least of how they feel about the general list, not so much like a super detailed opinion EIP by EIP. But also we do need to make realistic plans. So the question is like, yeah, do people think that even if not ideal, that can work, or is it just unrealistic in 2 weeks?
I think it can. We just need to schedule it, and yeah. So hopefully, yes.
Okay, anyone that really hates this? Otherwise, I do think we should probably lock in that approach. Okay, yeah, Alex, I think then we can say we continue with that, and we say that for can you maybe clarify also, Alex, for the 2 weeks from now, is that just for the EL client devs? How does that? I mean, again, the CL side is much more comfortable, but how would that map to the CL side?
Yeah, I mean, if like a CL client team finds it useful, then by all means, I think that would be good. But yeah, there's really only like 3 or so CL EIPs, so I feel like we could probably just cover them in turn.
Okay, yeah, then we just specifically make it a process point for the EL side. So then I'll also try to do some shepherding, reach out to you all, I also had a plan separately to maybe with a few colleagues from the research side have a few thoughts published. I just didn't want to do it before this call because obviously there's always this tension between me as a coordinator and me also sometimes having opinions. So if you see opinions of mine over the next week or so, make sure that treat them as just like as a researcher opinion or not a coordinator opinion. But yeah, then let's lock in the process. And so on ACDE in 2 weeks, we will hopefully have at least some general like documents from each EL client with a take on how we should go about these PFI EIPs. And then we can kind of dive into the details there. Lukas?
Should we also give opinion on CFI EIPs?
So you're asking specifically about FOCIL there? I think that's the only CFI EIP that we have.
Ah, okay. Yeah, sure. So, yeah, because it's like, we can weigh which ones we want more or less, right? So FOCIL should also be on this list where we should.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I do think, yeah, I would include FOCIL in the scope. That makes sense. It is, of course, primarily, I think, implementation overhead-wise is CL heavy, but I think governance side, it makes sense to have it covered on both. I'm trying to also follow along with chat. I guess there is a suggestion of whether we can repurpose out of the order basically like one CL side call ACDC for some EL work basically. Does anyone want to briefly talk about that idea?
So instead of waiting just for nothing, we should probably just go through all the EL EIPs in an ACDC call, or just rename that one call to ACDE so that we can have all the EL devs show up as well.
That seems reasonable. And would that be then, I assume that wouldn't really make sense for next week already, because I mean, A, that would be a bit short notice, and B, that would be before even that initial deadline. So is that more maybe for the one in 3 weeks then?
Well, I also think we should get through all the CL stuff first. Like, if we happen to, get through all the CL stuff and it's good, then yeah, if it makes sense, we could swap one of the calls.
Okay, so then you're saying this is better discussed on an ACDC call if it
Well,
basically we get
I
the
think
days.
more just we might need a little more time. Like, I think it's just one or two calls early to say we're going to need that.
Okay, so then let's bench this for now maybe. Or Ben, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, we often have extra time in ACDT also. I mean, we could maybe use that as well. Just because
Yes.
that's such a large volume.
Sounds good. So then, but do we all agree that that's all more for like basically after that initial 2-week period, or would basically does someone want to basically try to like allocate some specific time, ACD related time over the next 2 weeks already for some specific discussion?
I would say after.
Okay, then it's a good idea, and we can already like explore basically what candidates we have there. But yeah, let's then discuss in 2 weeks any kind of extra opportunities for discussion. Is there? I also saw in chat the question basically for any EIP champions that have EIPs proposed. Is there anything they can do basically like over the next 2 weeks to make the EIP maximally legible to basically make it easier for people as they go through the list to understand kind of the positioning of the EIP, anything like that?
this might be a little tangential, but I just want to call out Marius's comment here in the chat. Essentially having like a DFI section on a client team list would be very helpful. Just, if there's things we know we don't want, then we can just acknowledge that and hopefully cut down the list pretty quickly.
Real quick question. How complete is our list of champions for the EIPs? That would be a great way for folks to reach out and come to this meeting with specific questions that they have on each one. Is that going to be good to go and useful for people? Almost fully complete. Yes, Josh. Thank you.
And Josh, I think my understanding is that the one EIP that's missing a champion, we also have that on the agenda for today, right? I think that might actually get removed anyway, unless you're talking about a different one. Yeah, perfect. Justin, did you mean that we should have encouraged the EIP champions to specifically all show up in 2 weeks, or was that not what you were trying to say?
What I was trying to say was that the EIP champions and being able to contact them is a key part of the pre-work so that we can limit the discussion to specific questions that folks have for each EIP.
Okay, yeah. So basically, like, just this is a call to all the EIP champions. Please make sure you are very available over the next 2 weeks. If you want to give your EIP the maximal chances, people might specifically have questions. Might try to reach out to you. Make that as easy for people as possible. Okay, Alex, other than the specific kind of 2 weeks from now documents process, was there any other specific like proposed action item from your process overview, or would we just then take everything else as we go?
I think that's it. Yeah. I mean, again, the core constraint, let's say, is I would like us to have this settled by the end of next month. And yeah, I think having, written views as soon as possible will help people make progress throughout the next month. And definitely, yeah, if, we are, quote, twiddling our thumbs on the CL side, we can offer some time to keep the discussion going. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, hopefully it's pretty streamlined, and yeah, we won't need to make that many adjustments, but yeah. Otherwise, let's take it as we go.
Sounds good. And then one more comment from my side there. It would also be nice, given that the ACDE in 2 weeks again is like right in the middle of the DevCon week, if maybe people make sure that they internally discuss with their team so that like on next ACDE we can talk about what we do with that call. Do we keep it? Do we remove it? Obviously, that would then also inform the general discussion of whether we can find some alternative kind of call opportunities for EIP discussion. Yeah, I think that would be very useful. Yeah, with that, anyone else that, I mean, and I see there's an active chat discussion. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of offline discussion as well. Is there anything still on this around this general process question that we should synchronously discuss now? Okay, then I think we can go to some more general EIP, Amsterdam EIP housekeeping. We might have the list grow or shrink a bit more over the next few minutes. So let's all hope for the best. Hope for more EIPs being removed than added. But with that, Maria, you had 2 repricing related topics you wanted to touch on.
So the first one is a quick one. So on following this discussion, I posted here on the issue a proposal for adding 2 breakout calls to discuss repricing EIPs. So of the 31 EIPs, a lot of them are repricings, and they have some technical details that are not just changing parameters. Some are simply changing some numbers, but there are others that are have more depth, let's say. And so I think it would be useful to have 2 additional breakouts where we kind of deep dive on all the EIPs. We discuss potential issues, and then we can have some sort of early signaling on prioritization and understanding if things make sense. And the proposal would be to have it on Wednesday at 3 UTC. So we do next Wednesday and then the Wednesday after. And then after that, we can come to ACDE with an overview of the takeaways from that. So yeah, so I'm proposing it. I think it would be useful, but I want to know if folks that are interested in these find it useful, because if we don't have attendance in those breakout rooms, they are not as interesting. So yeah, just putting it out to see if folks think it's useful.
Ben?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite important because there are so many different repricing EIPs that we really need a holistic view of them all together. So I think it would be very valuable to have the breakouts beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased on this topic. I'm somewhat involved with a lot of this repricing work myself. Yeah, I do think that given that that's much more clustered, at least there's a lot of interconnections. I do think this would be very, very helpful. Do people, as Maria said, the idea would be to basically use both next Wednesdays. Does that work for people? I think it's enough. Like there's more than 10 EIPs that at least are related to repricing. So I think there's really a lot to go through. It would be a bit rushed to try to do this in a single call. Does that work for people, or is basically too much to ask?
Works for me.
Okay. So yeah, Maria, sounds like
Yeah. Seems like some people are interested. There are no clear cons or timings that don't work. So Perry, you are asking, do we expect community members at these repricing calls or not? I would say I think these calls should be open to anyone, but I understand that people that will show will be mostly for devs. But yeah, it would be okay to have community members as well.
But I would say, maybe clarification question, Maria, right? My assumption would be that it would be like the focus would be more the technical side, and like going through that and answering people's questions, but maybe less so the specific governance conversation, or like or do you have a
Right.
different?
No, exactly. It's mostly about like understanding the EIPs and doing more technical deep dives on it. Of course, the governance discussion will be on ACDE.
And I assume a little bit will be trying to smooth over any rough edges so that the EIPs are consistent with each other.
Right. Okay, so I think maybe we can move to the next topic. So Ansgar, I'm not sure what the process is, but we can figure it out. I think we will schedule these breakout calls. Cool. So the next topic I wanted, so I'll just quickly share my screen for this one. So I wanted to talk about rounding errors and why this is important for repricings. So first, what is the problem here? So the problem is essentially the compute opcodes are way too efficient when compared to the other operations and the current gas pricing. So this means that with integer gas, we cannot make them cheap enough to actually have the right balance of difference in pricing between the really efficient opcodes and the remaining opcodes. And so this means that at the moment, even if we do a repricing without doing anything else, we will have rounding errors. And what do I mean by a rounding error? So imagine that an operation, so we do the benchmarking, we find a certain anchor. So it could be, for instance, EC recover or something like this. And we say that an operation should cost 0.8. But because we cannot have fractional gas, we have to round it up to 1. And so this means that for that operation, we incur a 20% error due to rounding. So this means that we could fit 20 more of this operation if we were not rounding it. And you can see here, so here I'm just plotting the average rounding error for compute operations, assuming different anchors. And so here anchors, I'm using the milligas per second metric. So you kind of use these and then you assume a block execution time of 2 seconds. You derive the block limit and you can do then the anchoring based on that. And you can see here that with the performances that we have right now, so it's around the 30 to 50 milligas per second, we do have a lot of rounding errors on average. And then only after the 500 milligas per second anchor, which is an order of magnitudes larger than what we have right now, is when we actually start to have low rounding errors. And if we look at transaction level, so here I just took a sample of 1,000 blocks, and I saw how many of each opcodes were executed in those blocks, and I assumed the repricing based on SASTEC's empirical analysis, so the analysis for the EIP 704, and then I did the reprice assuming 50 milligas per second anchor. And essentially, you can see the level of errors that we get on an average block. So this would be around 4%. And so this is the problem. Now, I think we have 2 solutions, and I will just give like a quick overview of them. So one option is we just do a rebase. So we can go to all gas variables and parameters and just scale them by a factor of 1,000. Block limits and targets move from billion of units from million to billion, and gas costs move from units to thousands. And so this allows us then on the compute side to actually make them much more cheaper while still having integer gas. Or we can do fractional gas. So there was an old EIP called particle gas. So the idea would be similar. So we add a new counter. It could be milligas. And then everything inside the EVM execution of the transaction is accounted in milligas. And then we do a rounding at the end of the transaction. So during transaction execution, you use this new counter. After transaction execution, you round up. And then transaction fee, transaction gas limits, block limits, and everything is going back to the normal gas. So these are 2 solutions. So both have pros and cons. So on fractional gas, you are essentially adding some complexity to the EVM. So we are adding a new variable, and we are adding this mechanism of rounding at transaction level. But the gas rebase will likely impact UX. So this is kind of first a hammer on hard-coded values. So we may be breaking stuff. And also, so this point can be debatable. It's like how much of a different experience this is, because users mostly have the gas estimation with their wallets, and devs, maybe they can adjust, but essentially it's like the concept of gas and gas limit will change. And this could have an impact. So I know this was very fast, so I just wanted to have to put these in your attention, and also to ask if there's like any solution that seems to be clearly better than the other. And the reason I'm asking is I already have drafted initial EIPs for both solutions. And I can propose them both for Amsterdam, and then have this discussion during the governance process. Or if there's already a clear solution, I can just propose one of them, and then we can discuss if it makes sense to include it or not, instead of having to. So yeah, if there are any comments, I'll open the floor now. Also, I will share the link after. You have here the references for the analysis, for the compute repricing, and also for the PRs that I was telling you about. Okay, I'm trying to follow now the chats. Yeah, but please just jump in if you have any comments.
Andrew?
Well, I think it's an unnecessary complication, because there is a lot of variability in the actual costs, like which architecture you run on, which is the underlying libraries, like numerical libraries you use for computational heavy stuff. How, like, whether you use, like, for things like storage versus CPU, depends a lot on various data structures, hashes, and like whether you use an NVMe or not. So it's like there is so much variability that, to my mind, it's kind of the uncertainty in the actual cost is just too big to justify such fine grain adjustments. And we are, to my, like, I see it as we're trying to, like, this is a micro optimization, an unnecessary micro optimization. So we have much bigger fish to fry if we adjust the, like, do the like first, like, we should move step by step. First things first, like, let's do the first order pricing readjustment, which aligns better with the actual costs. But my point is, like, maybe the second order is just infeasible, because yeah, like, the real costs will vary a lot depending on the architecture, the hardware, and the software.
Maria, do you have
Right. So I think so. Your comment, you are not necessarily referring one solution over the other. You are just saying none of the solutions.
Correct. I think it's
right.
at this point, at least, none of the solutions are necessary.
Right. So I think to me, that discussion is something we can have at some point, and I think it makes sense to have based on all the other EIPs that we have. But yeah, I think I would like to focus more on just the difference between the two possibilities, and whether there's a clear one that is better than the other. But yeah, thank you.
then Carl next up?
Yeah, thanks. A few things here. Addressing some of the points raised previously, like, we always use the worst case client. So, like, sure, there's variability between clients, and even the benchmarks only have a limited resolution, but we always use the worst case client for a benchmark. And so, like, that is our constraint. I kind of disagree. If we're like have a like average rounding errors or something, or like if we have rounding, that's like 20% off. Like that's 20% scale, we're just leaving in one dimension on the table. Obviously, it'll vary per opcode, but I think this is like some kind of optimization we can achieve there. The second thing is that in effect, we are rebasing anyway. Like every single opcode, we're proposing changing the pricing here. So all rebasing is like the rebasing idea here is just being like, okay, cool, but we're gonna agree to change everything by a slightly bigger factor than we intended to. And we could like debate how big that needs to be, right? The proposed rebase here was 1,000, but even if we do a rebase of like scale everything by 10x, then something that was like a 20% error is now a 2% error. That's a very big difference. So yeah, I think there are many things we can do here to achieve some of these things here. I'm personally not a huge fan of doing particle gas. I think it's just like massive complexity here, but like within the EVM and risks of having consensus errors. But that's open for debate. The second thing that Light Client was raising is like concerns about breaking existing contracts. So I've been running some experiments, and in all the transactions we have ever like changing rebasing 1000x, there are 1000 transactions that would fail that would have previously succeeded, and 1300 transactions that have a different state root at the end. So in effect, like basically none of the transactions change or run into new errors or that kind of thing. So it seems to be like very marginal effects to like actual EVM users and transactions. So I don't think that should be a major thing that's holding us back right now. I think the bigger things you're going to see is like what happens on like when we like to existing like tooling and that kind of thing outside of the EVM and wallets, as opposed to like how does it break contracts within the EVM. It seems like people have been pretty good about not hard coding too much. Yeah, gas constants, etc.
Ben?
I mean, with rebasing externally, you have a problem that clients, because we were all too slow to move our defaults, have set what the block gas limit is, and so we don't control what the validators do. So we'd have to coordinate everybody to also rebase up unless we reinterpret the values. Then you've got wallets and so forth. There's a lot of UX on the upper end. Coupled with that, smart contracts that do, gas left and all that sort of stuff, or pass explicit gas in call opcodes. Whereas we could do, I mean, a particle gas, we wouldn't introduce floating point numbers. We'd just internally rebase. So in the EVM, we'd rebase everything up, and then when it was read, we'd just rebase it back down when when there's any introspection or at the end of the contract. So if we sort of did both, so the gas didn't change, but internally when we're processing it, we assume everything's 10 times bigger or 100 times bigger. And that could work.
Yeah, and my understanding is that is basically exactly that would be that variant you just described would be the milligas proposal, or there was I think an old EIP in the past called particle gas, all kind of similar ideas. Maria, can you briefly clarify? Is that it sounded to me at least, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So you have an internal counter that is still an integer, and then that would be the milligas counter, and all the opcodes prices would be in milligas. The gas left accounting would be in milligas. But then at the end of the transaction, you round up to gas, and so you report the EVM reports back the gas value, not the milligas. So everything at transaction limits, transaction fees, and so on and so forth, block limits are still in gas.
Okay. Potos?
Yeah, one thing that called my attention is that a bunch of the data supporting this is based on anchoring on 2 seconds to execution. And this will change dramatically on Glamsterdam, and then even potentially might change even more on the H fork. So that's something to keep in mind, that if we are anchoring on 2 seconds execution, then Glamsterdam gives us 8. Perhaps the numbers we're getting are wrong, or not the appropriate ones. And then again, if we shorten the slot times, then, well, that one might not be so dramatic if we also divide the gas limit. But again, the point stands that seems a little bit premature if we do not know what the effects of longer execution is going to be.
Yeah.
So I would add, the way that we are defining the anchors is on million gas per second. So you can then use that rationale to say what would be the block limit on a certain execution time. So if you want to do 2 seconds, you can make the conversion by multiplying it by 2. If you want to do 4 seconds, you multiply it by 4. But the anchor is on a per second. So it's kind of like it's independent. So the only thing that then, like if you are anchoring on a 50 million gas per second, the only thing is that if you are then allowing for 4-second execution time, you can raise the block limit by 4x that amount. But the rounding errors shouldn't change because it's on a per. So the plot I was showing is on a per transaction was the second plot, and the first plot was on the per output level. Does this make sense?
Yeah, maybe this specific topic we can type to the chat. I would also maybe try to time box this discussion a little bit. We can go a few more minutes, but given that we are not yet actually talking about the governance decision of including anything, we're just talking about which variant or both to even propose. So yeah, let's go through like whatever comments people still have, but then I do think we should probably leave some room for the other agenda topics as well. Andrew?
Yeah, I think what would be helpful is to maybe it's already reported somewhere, but I would like to see the variability of the actual costs, because as I mentioned, it depends a lot on the hardware, and even on the same hardware, there are some natural variability, like during to whether something is close to the CPU in caches and or not, things like that. So if you run a bunch of experiments, I would like to see the standard deviation and things like that. I think that would help us to, yeah, basically to make more informed decisions.
Right. So I was using the data from Jasek's empirical analysis. I'm happy to share the link, but in the slides, there's the link to the EIP, and then the EIP has the link to the analysis. But if you can't find it, I'm happy, like just ping me on Discord, and I'll share that with you. But we are also working on redoing some of those benchmarks, so we'll be able to make more numbers then. Okay, but
yeah, and
I guess
I would be interested in comparison of do we have minimum hardware specs? So I would like to see results both for NVMe versus SSD and for ARM versus AMD, at least.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Jasek's analysis was doing just one hardware spec, not multiple. But I can send that to you.
And just to mention, I do think that sounded like a general kind of repricing question, not just related to this precision question. So I think that would also be a great topic for next week's call, the breakout call, specifically around repricings, like the question of what are the benchmarking bases for the different repricing proposals. Carl, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just briefly, the repricing, like the data that's being used here is kind of should be treated as preliminary data. Like this is not the proposal for the final EIP. As clients are improving and as we get like much better benchmarking data, like expect these numbers to change and the exact things here to be reworked.
This is more just flagging what are the questions that we already know are going to come up based on what we can already see in this data. But yeah, all these concerns are very valid and should be brought up and like discuss these other things. But like we're not making the proposal here isn't to make a final decision on exactly how things are done right now.
Sounds good. Yeah, then maybe like it did sound like some people were skeptical that we need either of the two EIPs, and then within that, some people preferred one approach, some the other. I don't. There doesn't seem to be that much harm in having both proposed, given that at most one of them will make it into the fork anyway, other than to make the lives of everyone on the call that has to go through it in the next 2 weeks like slightly worse because they have to briefly understand that these two are basically just doing the same thing in different ways. But I feel like that's manageable given that we just talked about it. So I don't know. Like, does that mean maybe? Yeah, maybe it seems like the default outcome would be to maybe propose both.
Yeah, it seems like there's no consensus, so I would just simply propose both and give you more work. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Maria, for that segment. Then let's move on. The next one is nice because it might just actually reduce everyone's work a tiny amount. There are two EIPs that I think my understanding is can be removed from PFI list, but I want to briefly go through them. There is EIP 7667. Nixo, you first observed that it, or at least you left the comment on the agenda that it lacks a champion, and then also I think Sophia just now left a comment on the agenda saying that in the ZK team also thinks that Glamsterdam is not yet the right fork for this EIP. Is there anything to add on like the status of the CIP or any considerations around potentially removing it from the PFI set?
I can just say it was added to this PFI set only because it sort of came in a bundle with the last set of PFIs that were supposed to be for the Verkle fork. So it really wasn't even intended to be added to this fork in a way that that the other PFIs were. So it should be uncontroversial, but if anybody has any reason that it should be added, speak up
I
now.
think that's the other EIP actually that you described.
No, I think that's true for both EIPs.
Yeah,
both EIPs. Yeah.
This EIP was originally proposed in April of 2024.
And just for context for people, like this EIP, the reason why this one is at least in principle still relevant for the future, or and even before any state changes, is the idea is to make precompiles more expensive to account for the cost that it causes for ZK EVM provers. But I think my understanding is that basically, like in general, that discussion, both on the benchmark side, on the general, like, do we even want to do this? Do we want to make prices based on ZK performance? Is not yet advanced enough to be relevant yet for Amsterdam. So unless there's any specific objections, we can remove it from PFI. And then Guillaume already mentioned it. The other one I think that I came across, I think is even more clear cut. That's 6873, which is I think just a preparatory step for any kind of tree change. Like I don't know, Guillaume, do you have any concrete content? You already said offline that you think it would make sense to remove it from PFI.
Yeah, it was inherited from like it was moved I think by Tim to Fusaka or Glamsterdam. I guess it bounced to Glamsterdam after a while. We don't need it for the moment, so there's no reason to keep it on the roster.
Awesome. Then after this call, I'll remove both of these EIPs from PFI, and we made Yord's job just a tiny bit easier. So small win. Awesome. And thank you, Nixo, for bringing this up because yeah, that's really good. Yeah, then we have one more agenda point, which is Carlos wanted to talk about EIP 8058. Carlos?
Yep, I'll share my screen. One sec. What happens now? Okay, I need to restart Zoom, so just 1 second. Apologies. Thank you, Marius.
Marius, can you maybe do this, like, at the beginning of each stream before we go live? That would be really nice.
Okay, so you should be seeing my screen now. So yeah, I want to quickly present this EIP. Nothing really complex, so I think we can go quite fast through it. So basically, the idea is that with EIPs that are being proposed for Amsterdam, especially the ones that reprice state access and state growth aggressively, some of them like 8037 and 8038, one of the realizations that we came up with was that clients aren't basically incurring into any cost when the user deploys bytecode that is already deployed. So basically, it already exists on their database, and therefore they don't do anything. But they charge as if they were actually duplicating the bytecode, which is not something that they do. So the idea was to basically address this mainly because if we get something like EIP 8037, the gas cost for deploying a contract will jump up significantly, and the price that users will incur for deploying contracts will be quite outrageous. So if they aren't even incurring into any state growth, it's a bit weird to charge them that much. So the idea of the deduplication is simple. It's based on using access lists. The why will come later, but the idea is if you're a user and you know that this contract is already deployed and another account has its code hash stored, you just include this in the access list, and therefore the client, the only thing that needs to do is run the init code, hash the resulting bytecode, and see if those match. If there's a match, there's no need to actually deploy any bytecode, and therefore the client can skip charging the gas code deposit cost to the end user. So just to address some minimal things, if we are within the same block, the expected behavior is that transaction A will always pay the full gas cost if the address doesn't exist. If there's another transaction which happens to include the previous one, which is quite unrealistic but could happen, we basically treat it on this way and receive the duplication cost too. The core trade-off here, which is what I want to basically discuss, is the following. We went for the access list-based approach because there's two main problems. The first one is we don't want to force clients to hold a reverse mapping between code and account, which is what we will need to do if clients will be able to just look up this so that we basically A, reduce storage, or at least we don't make it even bigger, and B, we reduce the complexity of the EIP to the minimal. But there's a second thing, which is if you snap sync or you full sync, the bytecodes that you will have are different. Because some clients, when they full sync, they store bytecodes of reorgs because they are basically not part of the state technically. And so when you snap sync, you will not see an account that has the code hash, and therefore you will never ask for this range of leaves. And so what we have is essentially clients having, like in Cancun was a 27,000 difference between bytecodes that they have or bytecodes that they don't have between each other. So to avoid all of this mess, the simplest thing was to just do it via access list. The problem, of course, is that if we do it on this way, at the moment, there's no clients that actually expose any RPC endpoint to actually check for code duplication. There's external services that allow you to do that, like third parties, Etherscan, and there's some others. It's free to do so. But of course, I mean, I understand that it incurs in some UX friction. At the end, I tried to bring this topic to the wallet meeting last week, but no one showed up, so we couldn't discuss it. One of the main things that are against the UX burden is that the amount of unique versus duplicated bytecodes, as you see by the study of Wei Han from the stateless team, is that 97% of the bytecodes deployed are basically duplications. So the impact, I assume it will be minimal because most of the things that get deployed nowadays are just mere copies of things that already exist. And most of them are pretty standardized and famous, so it's not really hard to basically find an account that holds the code hash for the contract that you want to deploy. So basically, I think this is more or less it. I just added this thing so that you can basically see the difference between what you will pay and what you will not pay if we have the duplication in EIP 8037 for a 24 kilobyte contract. Of course, if we have 256 kilobyte contracts, this goes like to the moon. And yeah, next steps are just discuss this, figure out if clients want changes or they have questions or whatever. And if we can include it and finalize this thing, we will implement it at least for Geth. And yeah, that should be mostly it. So yeah, that should be it from my side. If there's any questions or whatever, happy to answer.
I have a question. Is this forward compatible with code chunking and putting the code into the tree?
That's a good point. I think it should be because the bytecode at the end is chunked always on the same way. But I would defer to Guillaume, who will probably have a much more informed answer.
The short answer is yes, there will be some tweaks to do, but yes, it is.
Okay, but we need to account for those tweaks beforehand with implementing this, or will be to these tweaks when we will get to code chunking?
I think it's more of a code chunking thing, but yeah, okay, I can make a write up to go over the exact issues and see if we find them. But from what I see, the code chunks would be stored exactly like code today, so there's no reason for it to be any different.
Because in Verkle we wanted to put code chunks directly into the tree, right?
Yeah, but code chunking code chunking has there are two versions of code chunking. There's a code chunking in 2926, which is an MPT based thing, and this is what I was referring to when I said there's no problem. When you go into any unified tree like the unified binary tree or Verkle trees, for that matter, we will need to change the EIP to actually put the code independently and not per account like it is currently specified. This is a conversation we want to have on the next stateless implementers call. But I think there's a lot of support for this, so in this respect there will not be any problem either, but we need to get to the details. But once again, this is only a problem for unified tree and not code chunking itself.
For discovery, I assume you just use estimate gas rather than, is this bytecode already deployed? Because that would be quite hard. You're not going to subtly change your bytecode to match one that already exists. But obviously, it would bring down the cost of like contracts that deploy contracts would become, like Uniswap V2 deploying liquidity pools. They would become very cheap because that's obviously exactly the same contracts that's deployed again and again.
But that's theoretically fair, no? Meaning the user is paying exactly for the resources that the node is consuming. So I would.
Yeah. I'm not against it.
Okay,
and
okay.
it would also encourage more reuse.
are there any strong opinions from clients on how we should handle the obtention of this reverse index? Meaning, is it okay if we, like, the worst case is the user pays the same that is paying nowadays. So there's no like drawback, I would say. But it's true that the way to obtain this discount at this point is mainly you need to iterate through your tree, or like you need to know what you're doing with the node, or you need to go to a centralized / third-party service. So are there any thoughts on that?
Wouldn't estimate gas, you know, the normal, what you do with the wallet tell you.
So estimate gas should be easy to do, right? Because for estimate gas, you already should have the access list field. So you can just check if the code exists or not.
Yeah, so I mean, I assume that's the approach somebody would try and discover. They're essentially saying, if I deploy this contract, how much is it going to cost me? That's why you want to know if the bytecode already exists, isn't it?
Yes,
So
I mean,
that would already come from estimate gas.
the problem is for estimate gas to work, the access list has to have the account whose code hash is basically your bytecode hash, right? So estimate gas will only work correctly if you are already providing the account which holds the code that you want to deploy. So that's the main problem, basically.
One issue I can see with it potentially is block access lists. You know, how does, where you have a contract deployed, the same contract deployed in the same block, is there might be some weird edges around pricing and parallel execution, because I'm not sure how that would works with block access.
I mean, transaction ordering is still a thing, right? Even if you have block access lists, meaning the way in which you execute the transactions is not related to how they are ordered in the block. So theoretically, the order of the block is what rules the entire thing, discount-wise at least.
Yeah, but what I mean is you're now changing the pricing of a transaction based on an earlier transaction, if you see what I mean. So you need to know whether the earlier transaction deployed the contract that you're trying to deploy in a later transaction. So there's a
Sure.
dependency.
Sure, that's true. I mean, the odds of that happening are scarce, I would say, because basically this means that in a block, two people or the same one through two different accounts deployed the same exact bytecode, which wasn't existing up to this point. So, I mean, this of course can happen, but it would be very weird, I would say. Nevertheless, I think since this is contract deployment and it will be heavily priced, block access lists won't have like much to do there. Meaning if you have two 24 kilobyte deployment within a block, there's not much more room left for computing much stuff. I mean, depending on the gas prices, of course, but.
Okay. Any further comments, discussion points on this specific EIP? And Carlos, can you remind me, this one is not yet in the PFI list, right? So this will also still be added, or?
I made the PR during the call, so I mean, I'm unsure if the bot merged it. No, it's still, I mean, it's in the CI phase, so
Okay.
It's pending. Yeah.
Perfect, sounds good. So then,
maybe
yeah.
One last question. Just I was just typing it, but I felt like it makes more sense to just say it. The last comment of Carlos, that with the block level access list, I think it wouldn't be a problem because the code deployment is also mapped to a transaction ID. So I think Carlos is right there that it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, awesome. Then thank you, Carlos. And the unfortunate news is that then out of the EIP section, we actually removed 2, but added 3. So not going our way, but at least that's all for today. So no more added now. Let's see how many more come throughout the week. But yeah, I think that's all for today then. There was an open discussion section, but I think it's really best if we just leave the Glamsterdam discussion to 2 weeks from now. And so with that, thank you everyone for coming, and talk to you all in 2 weeks and in between.
Bye.